Okay, quick show of hands. Have you ever played a critically acclaimed video game that you just didn't like? Recently, I became fascinated with trying to understand why games can be so praised by certain critics and fans, and yet they seem to completely bounce off other players. In exploring this question, I stumbled upon the science of play, which is a really interesting convergence of ethology, behavioral, and neuroscience. What I learned is that humans are hardwired to seek out playful behavior, but we don't all gravitate toward the same kinds of play. In fact, according to one of the pioneers of play science, Dr. Stuart Brown, most people tend to gravitate toward one of 8 distinct play personalities that he's observed over his career. You can think about these kind of like character classes. Some examples include the creator, the storyteller, and the explorer. In this video, I propose that by identifying which of these 8 play personalities you're naturally predisposed to, you can use that knowledge to better predict what video games you're likely to enjoy. And as a bonus, I'll be throwing in some of my own game recommendations for each personality. In a world with a dizzying number of options to choose from, I frankly need all the help I can get when it comes to filtering down that list. What I found was that by getting back in touch with my natural play personality, the same one that emerged in childhood and colored most of my experiences as a kid, I can now more clearly understand why I like the games that I like. And my hope is that this video can have the same effect for you. For the last year or so, I've had my eye on a spooky indie fishing game called Dredge. After its launch in spring of 2023, this game caught a bunch of attention, even earning multiple nominations at the Game Awards for categories like Best Independent Game and Best Debut Indie. Currently, it's sitting at 95% positive on Steam with nearly 30,000 reviews. A lot of people really like this game, but it turns out I am not one of those people, which I gotta say, I was surprised to discover. I finally played through Dredge a couple months back, and while I definitely don't consider this to be a bad game, I did find myself scratching my head at just how universally positive the feedback seemed to be. It begged the question, what were other players getting from this experience that I was either missing or overlooking? I spent some time scanning through the Steam reviews, and the overwhelming consensus was that people enjoy Dredge's core fishing loop, and they find the game's atmosphere and Lovecraftian-inspired story to be compelling. Well, this made things more confusing for me because I can't fully disagree with those statements. At first, I did find the mechanics of fishing and upgrading my ship to be engaging, and the world of Dredge certainly has a special quality to it that makes it a pretty cool setting for a fishing game. But while those elements were strong enough to satisfy most players, they just weren't enough to win me over. It was only after filtering to the negative reviews of Dredge that a different theme emerged, one that finally started to piece things together for me. In these reviews, the most frequent critique was that, despite being a game about dredging the floor of the ocean, players felt it lacked a meaningful amount of depth, primarily in the fishing mechanics, exploration, and progression. Many of these people commented that Dredge starts out strong, but it doesn't do enough to expand on the gameplay after the first few hours. This perfectly aligned with my experience. I did enjoy the first part of the game, but I had hoped there would be some evolving challenge as I progressed and upgraded my boat further. And that's not really what happens. Upgrading just makes the game even easier to manage, and disappointingly, the fishing minigames never require any skill, even for the rarest of fish. Now, this lack of challenge doesn't inherently make the game bad. That is abundantly clear from the Steam reviews. But my reaction to that experience did help me understand something important about my own play personality. Something I may have continued to overlook had I not discovered the rich field of play research. There is a lot of literature out there, much more than I could do justice in this one video. But I do want to hit you with a quick lightning round, just to share some of the bits that I found especially interesting. So here are 8 discoveries that scientists who have studied play in both animals and humans have figured out. Number 1, play is part of the neurobiology of all mammals, not just humans. That includes koalas, narwhals, even aardvarks play. Number 2, dozens of these mammals actually experience laughter when they play. Rats, cows, and even some birds have been known to do this. Number 3, the larger the brain of the species, the more playful they are in their youth. And number 4, the animals that are most playful in their youth actually tend to survive the longest as adults in the wild. Number 5, in humans, play is one of 7 primary emotional systems that are pre-wired in our brains. Some of the others include fear, lust, and rage. Number 6, play enhances learning, and some researchers consider it to be an absolute necessity for development in children. Number 7, on the other hand, deprivation of play can lead to a host of negative outcomes, including challenges with empathy, social incompetencies, and even mental illness. Pretty wild, right? If you are curious to learn more about these discoveries, I've included some links to sources in the video description. So that brings us to number 8, which, as I mentioned at the top of the video, is the number of distinct play personalities that Dr. Stuart Brown observed over his career as a clinical psychologist and professor of psychiatry. To arrive at these 8 personalities, Dr. Brown conducted thousands of interviews with people from many different backgrounds. And what he found was a set of clear patterns that emerged in the play preferences and behaviors of those he spoke with. Most people seem to have a dominant mode of play, which materialized over the course of their childhood. Dr. Brown also notes that no one is a perfect example of a single play personality. And some of us may have 1 or 2 secondary personalities in addition to our dominant mode. These were originally conceived with all types of play in mind, but that doesn't prevent us from looking at them specifically through the lens of video games. After all, games offer an incredibly diverse range of experiences, and it should come as no surprise to anyone watching that us gamers can have pretty significant differences in taste. Okay, let's dive into these 8 personalities. And for each one, I'm going to share examples of video games that I think would be great picks for anyone with that dominant persona. The first play archetype is called the Explorer. Explorers are drawn to the satisfaction of discovery, whether that comes from visiting a new place, finding a new restaurant, or even pondering a new idea. The gaming landscape is rich with opportunity for explorers. An obvious category for them would be open world games, which often build a lot of their core systems around players exploring new areas of the map. But explorers may also find pleasure in something like searching for hidden indie gems on Steam. My game recommendations for this personality include No Man's Sky, which offers truly infinite space exploration, Breath of the Wild, one of the best designed open worlds ever made, and Tunic, which is definitely not an open world game, but absolutely rewards exploration and experimentation. Next up, we have the Joker. Simply put, Jokers try to find the humor in their play. They're always looking for ways to make others laugh and can easily amuse themselves even in the most mundane scenarios. For single-player games, the Yakuza series would be a strong pick for its assortment of wacky shenanigans. If British humor appeals to you, I would also check out the recently released Thank Goodness You're Here, which I've heard is very funny. And for multiplayer, something like the Jackbox games can be an endless source of laughter, specifically Fibbage and Quiplash. Although, even just messing around with some friends in a game like Fortnite or Party Animals can give the Joker a chance to shine. The Storyteller is the persona who plays by creating, sharing, or just relishing in great stories. They usually have active imaginations and a flair for rich details. They also tend to give the best recommendations for shows, books, and movies. As for video games, this personality feels the most engaged when narrative is a centerpiece of the experience. If that sounds like you, I would definitely check out games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Nier Automata. These are beautifully written cinematic adventures that you can't help but be pulled in by. It may also be worth exploring role-playing games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Disco Elysium, as these can offer more agency to craft your own adventure as opposed to just following a handful of predetermined paths. The competitor thrives in environments and activities where they can test their skills. This personality plays by honing their abilities and competing to win, whether that's versus other humans on the basketball court or the computer in a round of virtual chess. Luckily for this persona, the vast majority of games offer players some kind of challenge to overcome. So there's definitely no shortage of great picks for these types. Souls and roguelikes are well tuned for competitors. Check out Sekiro for punishing third-person combat, Slay the Spire for strategic deck building, and Hades for an all-around good time. I'll also throw in Rogue Legacy 2 because that game is incredible and it does not get nearly enough attention. On the multiplayer side, it really comes down to picking your poison. Personally, Overwatch, Halo, and Battlefield were the competitive games that I've put the most hours into over the years, but I can't in good faith recommend any of those franchises at the moment. If you find joy in planning, organizing, or just being in charge, your play personality might be the director. These types are often found hosting parties, organizing events, and planning extensive travel itineraries. In the virtual world, strategy and management games are two categories that directors should get familiar with. My recommendations here include Cities Skyline, Stardew Valley, and the Civilization series. I also recently picked up Against the Storm, which combines roguelite and city building elements in a really fun package, so check that one out too. For those of you who spent your childhood rummaging through bins of mismatched Legos, your play personality could be the creator. These individuals are happiest when they're making things or expressing themselves through artistic pursuits. If great building mechanics and flexible sandboxes are your thing, then Minecraft, Valheim, and Satisfactory are all worth a look. Animal Crossing and The Sims will scratch that interior design itch. And for those who are more inclined to pencils and brushes, check out the recently released Ete, which looks to be a really nice painting adventure set in the city of Montreal. The Kinesthete is always moving. They experience play through the fluid motion of their bodies and enjoy anything that can keep them active. They are dancers, gymnasts, and athletes, though unlike the competitor, winning is not the primary motivation for kinesthetes. Movement and rhythm games will best engage this personality, especially if played in virtual reality. Some of my favorites there include Synth Riders and Thrill of the Fight. But if VR is not your thing, I would check out Rollerdrome for a fantastic blend of Tony Hawk-style tricks and bullet time shooting, and Hi-Fi Rush for controller-based rhythm action. Even something like Monster Hunter might appeal to kinesthetes because the combat is all about stringing combos and carefully timing your window. And finally, we have the Collector. If you were the kid who amassed an absurd library of Pokemon cards, and you never actually learned how to play the game, you are probably a collector. This personality enjoys collecting things of all shapes and sizes, and they feel a sense of pride in showing off those items and achievements to others. I'll be honest, video games can be dangerous territory for collectors because there are so many things to collect in any given game. This type can also find themselves striving for completionist playthroughs, with that 100% trophy becoming the item that they seek to collect. That being said, games can also be incredibly rewarding for this persona. Speaking of Pokemon, check out Cassette Beasts for a fresh spin on the creature collecting genre. Metroidvanias like Ori and Hollow Knight would be great picks, and if you fancy some third-person platforming, finding all of the moons hidden about in Super Mario Odyssey can be a ton of fun. Oh, and you might like this spooky indie fishing game called Dredge. That's right, we've come full circle, because Dredge would be a good game for collectors. There are more than 100 different kinds of fish to catch, and each gets its own entry in the fishing journal. As I discovered upon my own self-reflection, the collector personality is one that I actually don't experience very often. In fact, out of the 8, it might be the one I least associate with. As you may have guessed by the nature of my criticisms about Dredge, my dominant play personality is the competitor. While I certainly alternate to other personas like the creator, explorer, and kinesthete, there is no question that the competitor is my default. It's why I love all kinds of games, including board games, sports, and stupid boy bets like seeing who could be the first one to double bounce a ping pong ball into a conch shell. And even though I'm not obsessed with super challenging games, I always enjoy the process of getting better, of improving my skills. And I hate losing. So, how does one find their play personality? Well, I'm sure some of you could identify yourself just from hearing me read out the list. For others, it may require deeper self-reflection. This was the case for me because at first glance, I felt connection with most of the personalities. Uncovering your dominant mode often requires looking back to your early years of development. There are some short quizzes you can find online, but I tried most of these and they were pretty crap. A resource that I did find helpful is this simple sheet of prompts on the website for the National Institute of Play. Here are a couple quick examples from that PDF. Number 1, think of situations when you've been completely free to do what you choose. What do you do in those situations? And number 2, can you recall any times when you were so engaged in something that more time had passed than expected, or you forgot about other responsibilities, or you entered a state of flow? If so, what were you doing in those situations? Aside from thoughtful self-reflection, some other sources of insight can come from chatting with parents or family members, people who may have memories before your own, or who can just share an external perspective. You'll know you're on the right track when you can look over your recently played games and see the patterns start to emerge. This is what happened to me. I realized that most of my favorite games from the past year have directly appealed to my dominant or secondary play personalities. And that is why I believe there is power in understanding this about yourself. We've all used genre classifications, gameplay trailers, and reviews to help us inform our video game purchases. And all of those data points can be important inputs to the equation. But if we overlook our natural preferences when it comes to the types of play we've enjoyed since childhood, it's possible that those other data points can lead us down the wrong path to a game that looks great on the surface, but may actually be more suited to other play personalities. I'm not saying you can't enjoy a game that doesn't completely align with your play personality. In fact, trying games outside of your normal comfort zone can be a fantastic way to further engage with this hobby. And novelty alone might make something worth your time. My point here is more about improving the odds of satisfaction when jumping into a new game. Let's say the last few titles you've picked up haven't really done it for you, and now you're just craving something good. If that is your goal, then considering all the evidence on the table can only improve your chances of picking something you'll love. Understanding your own play personality can be part of that evidence. So, why not spend a little time reflecting over the next couple days? Even if I haven't fully convinced you that it can help you pick better games, at the worst, you'll learn something about how you like to play in other areas of life. And for those of you who feel confident about which of the 8 personalities you are, I would love to hear game recommendations in the comments that you think would fit that personality. I'm sure I missed a ton. As always, thank you so much for watching. And if you learned something or enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like on the way out. See you guys in the next one.